On this episode of You Tell Me, we got our special guest in with us. We got black man, white coat, Dr. Derrick Burgess with us tonight because we got to start off this You Tell Me with Doc. The world gasped simultaneously last night when JuJu went down for USC women's basketball, and now it has been announced ACL. Doc, you tell me, what does this mean going forward for her? Talk to us about ACLs. Give us what you got for a pork chop.
First, I'd like to take a second just to talk about the magnitude of her injury, not only for her personally, but for the game of basketball. Not only women's basketball, but the game of basketball. We're talking about a sophomore in college who we've known now for at least 3 years. It's not many athletes that who they are as a high school junior and senior. So, to see her go down, I think it hurts everyone. It's crazy just looking at the game. People stop paying attention to the game. Everybody's on their phones and really just, caught up in that moment. But as we talked about a couple of weeks back, we had Kyrie Irving go down with an ACL tear. And now here we are a couple of weeks later, and one of the biggest stars in college basketball, in basketball in general, is down. So just kind of what, I saw, she's coming down the court, she's being defended. She gets bumped on her left side and she takes an awkward step. And as soon as that leg plants in the ground, you can see it give. So what happened, just kind of the science behind it, she planted her right leg in the ground and you see it collapse inward. We call that valgus. And as soon as it collapsed inward, she goes down. So at that point, that's probably when the ACL snapped as well, maybe even the MCL. So we don't have all the details now. They've come out and mentioned ACL, as we talked about before. Does she have a meniscus tear? Does she have a MCL tear? What else is going on inside the knee? We really don't know yet.
All right, Doc, when you're watching these kind of events on TV and based on your carrier, live ain't live no more. Let's put it that way. It's a slight delay,
Right.
but you pretty much text me right like when it happened. Was there something you saw in the awkwardness of the replay that kind of from your profession as an orthopedic surgeon just said, yeah, I see what it was, or were you kind of hoping for the best? What goes through like the physician mind when you see it? Because everything don't mean the worst case, but like you text me like spot on.
Yeah. So I always hope for the best. And I tell my athletes, hopefully I'm wrong. But when I see someone coming down and that leg plants and automatically you go down, and she's tough. I mean, 2 nights ago, she sprains her ankle, limps back, pops a 3 and keeps playing. So when you see someone go down in that much pain, and the first thing she grabs is her knee. So I'm like, oh boy, here we go. And then they play the replay because, it happened like it was a boom, boom. She gets bumped. She's on the ground. So I'm like, okay, what just happened? And then they showed the replay. And as soon as I saw that right foot hit the ground and cave in, I was like, wow, that's an ACL until proven otherwise.
Doc, when you think about like the ACLs, the MCL tears, and when you get into professional sports, those are injuries, especially in the NFL. I can't speak for the WNBA, but for the NFL, those are injuries that don't scare people as much because there's a history of coming back.
Yeah.
In basketball, you see a guy like Baron Davis. I always talk about how Baron Davis tore his ACL and came back jumping higher. Mm-hmm. What is it about those ACL tears that allows people to get back and kind of just pointing to maybe a silver lining that is an injury that she'll be able to come back from? What is about the ACL and the rehab that allows people to come back so strongly?
So I say ACLs are probably one of the most closely studied injuries from a scientific standpoint. I mean, we know now the science behind how long it takes for the graft to heal in. We know which muscles you need to focus on. We know at what point you should be doing certain things. So it's a very scientific, very well-studied part of sports medicine. Now, if you rewind 30, 40 years ago, your career was completely over. But now the technology has advanced so much where we can do the surgeries better and they can rehab them better. So, many times you're able to get back. But I would say probably about 85 to 90% of the people will get to their pre-injury state, but not everybody. And that's, you never know. You could have an infection. You could have a graft re-tear. we always expect, we say, okay, they'll be back in X amount of time, but we never leave room for anything to go wrong.
Yeah, I think, Doc, that what we've seen in these injuries, and that's why we love having you, the expert, on. There's sometimes during the season or during a training camp, like it happening this particular day or month is much better than this particular because of the time it takes to come back.
Right.
Well, with this essentially being late March, early April from a surgery recovery standpoint, like one could expect that she's not going to play basketball in 2025, because we're 3 months in going into the fourth month. And so you probably won't see her on a court playing ball until literally January, February 2026. What is that about right timeline wise?
I'd say I would give her at least 9 to 12 months. And to be honest, do we need to see JuJu again as a college athlete to know what she can do as a pro? So I'm her agent. We're taking our time to get back to being 100% before putting her back on the court, because she's proven all to me, all to the world. I think everybody know who she is as a star, as a player. Now she has to really just take the time for herself to get healthy.
And Dukes, let me throw one from the chat to him. Maya asks, her surgery took place quickly. Does that mean it's a lower grade tear? What is it about the speed that the surgery takes place or how soon it takes place as it correlates to what type of injury it is?
So I didn't see where her surgery is already taking place. Typically, what we do is try to get the inflammation down as well as get range of motion and your ambulation back to normal. We want you at least walking around normal. Now, everyone's a little different, and especially when you have as much spotlight on as JuJu does, sometimes things change a little bit. Now, I don't think that means that it's less. I think they just might have a different algorithm for doing the surgery. But more than likely, if she had more than one ligament, you probably would delay it a little bit more. So hopefully that's something to be optimistic about.
Doc, are there any exercises or things that people can do to help prevent ACL tears?
Yeah, so we call it neuromuscular training. So it's a lot of hops, jumps, landing, proper cutting techniques. We really emphasize that in adolescent sports, especially for young ladies, because we know that young ladies are at 4 to 5 times higher risk of having an ACL tear than males that play the same sport, especially those that are playing high. The highest sports that we see it in, soccer, basketball for females. So we would like to get them into these training as well as hamstring strengthening. Many times you go to the gym, you work on your quads. So a lot of people are what we call quad dominant, but their hamstrings and their hip girdles are really weak. And one thing, when that knee collapses, your hips play a large role in that too.
One last question. A lot of people are either right side dominant or left side dominant. And you don't really realize it until you get into a position where you have to realize, like, hey, my left side isn't as strong as my right side. Is there any correlation between being a dominant side or a dominant hand, dominant leg jumper, or dominant hand player and injuries when it comes to not, I guess, properly, balancing how much you work out or giving your left side more work or your weak side more work than the strong side?
So I won't say necessarily hand dominance, but a lot of times you are one side more dominant than the other. So you have to really make sure that you're focusing on building, and that's why cross training is so important. That's why having a true off season is important. And now I was telling someone earlier, what I don't like about where we are with female basketball right now is that people will finish their college whole season, and within 4 weeks, they're having a draft and they're starting another season. So where's the downtime? And we already know, like we mentioned, female athletes are more at risk, and the more exposure you have on the court, the more likely you're going to be injured. So why are we subjecting people who are at the highest risk to have to play these back-to-back seasons, and then you'll finish the WNBA season and maybe go overseas to play again? So what is that really about?
Yeah. If you are just checking in with us, it is You Tell Me, Tuesday Night Live with Uncle Neely and Philip Deuce, a.k.a. Deuce Scoop. Special guest joined us for the early segment. We like to call him Black Man, White Coat. Dr. Derrick B., orthopedic surgeon. Everyone saw last night the injury, women's basketball to JuJu, and we're just discussing the ACL and what that means. And one of the things, Doc, that you brought out, when I asked about the timeline, 9 to 12 months, and how that puts you into literally 2026 calendar year, I think I know you're not her agent, but from a physician standpoint, and what you just articulated, how these schedules mesh, why? Just take your time, get it right, and go to WNBA.
Right.
Because other than, I think she was even this year maybe 50 points shy of a season record in points scored. We're not going to get that because you won't play again this year. But other than some personal record goals out there, she has proven, everything she needs to prove. Now it's just time to prove that she can come back and be 100% plus.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And, I think everybody's rooting to see her get back. The game of basketball is not the same without her on the court. The rest of the tournament is not the same. It's crazy that she went down and her commercials are still playing throughout the whole game. I mean, it's not even basketball commercials. She's the real deal.
Yeah. And I'll say this as a rule perspective, Dukes, in the NBA, you have a clear path foul. You can't impede somebody's direct path to the basket if they're in front of you by grabbing them from behind, that kind of thing. But there's another rule in basketball, and it's about an equal right to the same space on the floor. The defender was side by side with her, gave her a hip check foul. It was a foul, no doubt, but to me, it wasn't the dirty kind of foul where someone's trying to injure you. And I know that during the handshake line post game, and when the other young lady from Mississippi State would come in the game, she was getting the chorus of boos. I didn't see anything, guys, that just said, "Oh man, that's a dirty play." It just looked like a freak accident from a pretty common foul.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because as soon as you mentioned she got hurt, and the next trip down the court we're booing, and then a couple of trips later we're booing, and it's sad because in sports, who knows what kind of calls or threats she got today. And it was a basketball play. I didn't see anything malicious about it. She gets bumped, she makes an awkward step, and she goes down. However, some people will definitely hold her responsible for injuring the major star in basketball.
When we talk about NFL, we talk about football, you always hear about non-contact injuries.
Right.
Is there a disparity between non-contact injuries as far as ACL goes in between football and basketball? Like, is it different, or is football a little bit different because of the way they cut and the way the game is played?
So we say in general that ACL tears are about 70% non-contact. And many times you'll see, even when a receiver catches the ball and they stick their foot in the ground, they just fall down. So a lot of times, even in football, you're not getting hit. Now, I would consider last night a contact injury. I mean, her body position changed because of the impact that she took on her left side. So even though no one fell into her right knee, her mechanics were off because of the contact that she got. But typically, you'll just see someone land. A pure non-contact is when someone lands from a rebound and that knee just collapses in and gives out, or you see that receiver coming across and they stick their foot in the ground. I think maybe when Odell tore his, you stick your foot in the ground and you just off of it real quick, and everybody's like, "What happened?" And you're gone.
And that's why I'm considering it from my lens a common foul, not a dirty play, because when she got bumped on the left side, it just coincidentally her left was off the ground, so it put all the weight on the right knee and it kind of wobbled. Well, Dukes, when a person has the ball, they'll also initiate that same content offensively to a defender, putting more weight on one leg than the other. And so, shout out to JuJu and what she's going through the surgery, but also shout out to the young lady who quote unquote caused it, because I don't think it was something deliberate that she should be attacked for or getting threats for. This is, a tournament, it's sports. I didn't see something where she was like head hunting and, went at her neck or something. It was just a foul that the worst thing could have happened from.
Yeah, I agree.
And Doc, if you had one exercise that you could pick for rehab for anybody, whether it be football, basketball, after a torn ACL, which exercise do you think is the most important or the most impactful for rebuilding that strength in the knee?
So I'd say probably some proprioceptive exercises, because you'll get your strength back. Meaning,
you got to hit that horn on that big word. That's a bomb.
So what I mean by that is knowing where your body is in space. So when you land, when you get ready to cut, knowing how your body reacts. And we can do that by multiple hops and jumps. We do a lot of jumping for distance, single leg hops, double leg hops, hopping and stunning in place and then exploding off of it. So those activities are usually what is like in that final phase to get you ready to get back on the court.
Okay.
Doc, before we let you get it here, I got one more for you. I've noticed around my football days when I see an ACL happen, and of course, when it happens, you're not aware it was an ACL, at least not from my layman's eye. Same thing with last night. But one of the things I often see is this grabbing of the area, right? So this seemingly insurmountable pain.
Yeah.
And then after a little while goes on, you even see some people get up and put weight on it and then find out it's the ACL, had to have surgery. What is it about that initial tear that is so painful, but then 5 minutes later you can walk on it, but then 6 hours later you got to have surgery? Like what happens in the process of it tearing that it goes from the image you see to being able to even stand on it?
Yeah, so initially what people will often tell me, they'll come in and say, I felt 2 or 3 pops, and then my knee just completely gave out on me. And I think that initial pop and that pain of when the ligament tears, the bones kind of hit each other, that's very painful, as well as feeling that popping, tearing in your knee. So after about probably 30 minutes or so, swelling's going to start. So you might be able to move around, and then I'll see someone getting on a bus or getting on a plane. I'm like, uh-oh, that knee's already swollen. And the next day, for sure, they're going to be really stiff. So sometimes the best exam you might get is when they're laying right there on the court before they start to stiffen up and guard against it. But it's really the swelling that takes place in that first couple of hours that really, you have to get that down before they're moving well.
Well, Doc, as always, brother, we appreciate your time and appreciate your partnership under the Pregame Network umbrella. This is one of those instances where we're happy to have the partnership with you. But also, man, we really wish we didn't see you so much because we don't want these injuries happen all the time. But throughout the season, he's going to be on with medical reports. And when injuries happen such as this, bringing us the latest analysis of what that player is going through and enduring and how they're going to get back on their feet. Doc, we appreciate you. Let the folks know where they can find you and your podcast in between time.
Yeah, so my podcast, Time Out with the Sports Doctor, you can find me on YouTube as well as all places where podcasts are played. Also, you can find me on Instagram, Dr. Derrick, the Sports Doctor. Check me out. Be glad to connect with you. Glad to talk injuries or whatever with you.
My man, Dr. B, in Finu Pie, black man, white coat. Until next time, we see you, brother. Appreciate you. Deuce to Scoop.
Yo.
Hey, man, we had to start off, you tell me, with that report from the special doctor talking about a special player, man. I don't like to see women cry, man, but it's so hard to watch a pretty one cry, too.
Boy, you crazy.
JuJu laying down there last night, something took something out of Unc, man. I felt like I was down there with it. Took something out of old Unc.
No, man, she's, a phenomenal player. From everything that's put out in the media, an even better person. So you hate to see that. And, the basketball fans were robbed of seeing, the rest of the tournament with her being in it because you just see how she's played the entire year. And but hopefully, like Doc said, it's one of those injuries where there's so much science around it that hopefully she can make a recovery to her pre-injury status because she best in the country hands down, right? So man, I hate it, man.
You talk about just coming up, man. I'm 53, and I can remember when open heart surgery was a death knell, and people be home in 2 or 3 days after now. So it's medical science and the way this progressed and the way we deal with these injuries and the rehab from them. I do just think it's important for a competitive athlete like herself. And I know, she has a strong resolve as well as her family and her handlers, but we all know this is a 9 to 12 month deal. And there ain't no need trying to be Aaron Rodgers and anybody else. Just shut it down for 2025, man. This is next February, next March,
Yeah, man. And that's the toughest part, right? When you have a true competitor. And I think the hardest person to sell on any of that is going to be JuJu.
Yeah.
I think she wants that natty. She wants to solidify herself as that player. That she can live up to the billing that she's gained and the recognition that she's gained. And I think it's one of those things where if you can sell it to her in the right way, you frame it like you want to protect her from herself. But I know as the competitor that she is, man, she's gonna be scratching at the bit trying to get back right.